Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her palms against the thick glass wall of the observation chamber. The water was already at her knees. Cold. So cold it made her bones ache. She had been trapped inside for 10 minutes now. The door had sealed behind her. The drainage system had reversed itself. And somewhere above her she knew exactly who was responsible. Commander Vexus of the Tarani Empire had never hidden his hatred for humans. He called them weak. He called them soft. He called them a disease that spread across the galaxy too fast for any civilization to stop. When the Galactic Council assigned Sarah to the research station on Kepler 7, Vexus had protested loudly. A human had no place among the great species of the universe. A human would only cause problems. Now he was solving that problem in his own way. The water reached Sarah's waist. She took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. Panic would only make things worse. She had survived worse than this. She had survived the mining accident on Europa. She had survived the plague ship near Andromeda Station. She had survived 37 years of being human in a galaxy that often wished humans had never left their tiny blue planet. She would survive this too. But as the water climbed higher, touching her chest now, she wondered if her survival instinct was finally wrong. Outside the observation chamber, in the main corridor of the research station, 5 young Tarani cubs watched with wide silver eyes. They had been on their way to the feeding hall when they heard the strange sounds. Water rushing, metal groaning, and something else. Something that sounded like a voice calling for help. The cubs were not supposed to be in this section of the station. Their parents had told them to stay in the residential quarters. But cubs are cubs everywhere in the universe. They wander, they explore, they find trouble even when they are not looking for it. The oldest cub was named Crix. He was 12 cycles old, which made him almost an adult by Tarani standards. His fur was dark blue, and his ears were tall and pointed. He pressed his face against the window of the observation chamber and stared at the human inside. He had never seen a human up close before. He had heard stories. His father said humans were dangerous. His mother said humans were unpredictable. His teachers said humans were too emotional to be trusted with important work. But the human he saw now did not look dangerous. She looked small. She looked alone. And she looked like she was about to die. The water was at her shoulders now. "We have to do something," said Mira, the youngest cub. She was only 6 cycles old. Her fur was pale silver, and her voice was high and frightened. "She is going to drown." "She is just a human," said Tosk, another cub. He tried to sound brave, but his hands were shaking. "Humans die all the time. That is what Father says." "Everyone dies all the time," said Crix quietly. "That does not mean we should let them die when we can help." He looked at the control panel beside the door. It was locked. A red light blinked slowly, indicating that someone with high authority had sealed the chamber. Crix did not know the access code. None of the cubs did. But Crix remembered something his engineering teacher had said once. Every system has a weakness. Every lock can be broken if you understand how it works. He pulled the cover off the control panel and stared at the wires inside. His hearts were beating fast. 2 hearts, like all Tarani. Both of them pounding with fear and something else. Something that felt like purpose. "Crix, what are you doing?" asked Venna, a cub with spotted gray fur. "If the elders find out we touched the systems, we will be punished." "If we do nothing, the human will die," said Crix. "Which punishment is worse?" Inside the chamber, Sarah saw the cubs at the window. Her heart ached at the sight of them. They were so young, so small. They reminded her of her students back on Earth, the ones she had taught biology to before she joined the Galactic Research Initiative. Children were the same everywhere. Wide eyes, curious minds, hearts that had not yet learned to hate. She pressed her hand against the glass. The water was at her chin now. She tilted her head back, breathing the last air in the chamber. She did not want the cubs to watch her die. She wanted to tell them to go, to run, to forget they ever saw this, but she could not speak. The water was too high. Then something happened. The smallest cub, the one with silver fur, pressed her own hand against the glass on the other side. Palm to palm, separated by only a few inches of transparent material. Sarah saw the cub's eyes. They were filled with tears. Real tears. The same tears humans cried when they were sad or scared or moved by something bigger than themselves. The cub did not see a human in that chamber. She saw a person, a living being who did not deserve to die alone. Crix worked faster. His claws tore at the wires. He had watched his father repair systems before. He had paid attention even when his father thought he was not watching. That was another thing cubs did everywhere in the universe. They learned even when no one was trying to teach them. "This wire connects to the emergency override," Crix said, talking to himself as much as to the others. "If I can redirect the power, the door will open automatically. The system will think there is a fire." "But there is no fire," said Tosk. "The system does not know that," said Crix. He twisted two wires together. Sparks flew. The lights in the corridor flickered. And then, with a loud hiss, the door to the observation chamber slid open. Water poured out like a river breaking through a dam. The cubs scrambled backward, but they did not run away. They watched as the human came with the water, tumbling out of the chamber and landing on the cold metal floor. She was not moving. Mira screamed. "Is she dead? Crix, is she dead?" Crix ran to the human and knelt beside her. He had no idea what to do. He did not know human biology. He did not know how their bodies worked or how to bring them back from the edge of death. But he remembered something else. Something from a story his grandmother had told him when he was very small. A story about ancient Tarani warriors who saved each other from drowning by pushing the water out of their lungs. He pressed his hands against the human's chest and pushed down hard. Once, twice, 3 times. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on, human, breathe." The other cubs gathered around him. Venna took the human's hand. Tosk held her legs still. Mira wiped the water from the human's face. They worked together without speaking, without thinking, without remembering that this was supposed to be their enemy. On the 4th push, Sarah coughed. Water sprayed from her mouth. She gasped for air, her body convulsing as life rushed back into her. She opened her eyes and saw 5 young faces staring down at her. 5 young Tarani cubs who had just saved her life. You saved me," she whispered. Her voice was rough. Her throat burned, but she was alive. Crix sat back on his heels. His hands were shaking now. The full weight of what he had done was starting to hit him. He had disobeyed the elders. He had damaged station property. He had saved a human. His father would be furious. But looking at the human now, seeing the color return to her pale cheeks, seeing the gratitude in her strange, round eyes, Crix did not feel afraid anymore. He felt proud. "Why did you do it?" Sarah asked. She was still lying on the floor, too weak to stand. "Your people hate humans. Why did you help me?" Mira answered before anyone else could speak. "Because you were scared," she said simply, "and because being scared is bad, and because helping makes the scared go away." Sarah laughed. It hurt to laugh. It made her chest ache and her eyes water. But she laughed anyway because the little cub had just explained something that adults across the galaxy had never understood. Kindness did not need a reason. It did not need logic or politics or cultural approval. It only needed a heart willing to act. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Adult footsteps, heavy and fast. The cubs looked at each other with fear in their eyes. The elders were coming, and when they arrived, they would see everything. The broken control panel, the flooded floor, the human lying among their children. Commander Vexus was the first to arrive. His fur was dark red, and his eyes were like black stones. He looked at the scene before him, and his face twisted with rage. "What have you done?" he roared at the cubs. "What have you foolish children done?" But before he could say another word, more adults arrived. Station workers, scientists, security officers, and among them was Elder Korath, the highest authority on Kepler-7. She was ancient by Turani standards, her fur white with age, her movements slow but steady. She looked at the cubs. She looked at the human. She looked at the broken control panel and the water still dripping from the walls. "Someone attempted to murder the human ambassador," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, but there was iron beneath the calm. "Someone sealed her in that chamber and activated the flood system. The security logs will show exactly who did it." Vexus went pale. "And yet she lives," Elder Korath continued, "because 5 cubs had the courage that their elders lacked, because 5 children saw a life in danger and chose to save it, even though they were taught to fear the person they saved." She turned to look directly at Vexus. "Perhaps our children are wiser than we are, Commander. Perhaps they understand something we have forgotten." Sarah finally managed to sit up. Her body was weak, but her mind was clear. She looked at the cubs who had saved her, at the 5 young faces watching her with a mixture of fear and hope. "Thank you," she said. The words felt small compared to what they had done for her, but she meant them with her whole heart. "Thank you for seeing me, not as a human, just as someone who needed help." Crix nodded slowly. "My grandmother says that courage is not about being strong. It is about doing what is right, even when you are scared." "Your grandmother sounds very wise," said Sarah. "She is," said Crix. "She also says that the universe sends us tests to see who we really are. Maybe this was a test." Sarah smiled despite the pain in her body. "If it was a test, you passed it, all of you." In the days that followed, Commander Vexus was removed from his position and sent back to the Turani homeworld to face judgment. The 5 cubs became heroes of the station, their story spreading across the communication networks of a dozen systems. But the cubs did not care about being famous. They cared about something much simpler. Every evening after their lessons were finished, they would visit Sarah in the medical bay. They would bring her food from the feeding hall. They would tell her stories about their families and their dreams, and she would tell them stories about Earth, about oceans that covered most of a planet, about creatures that lived beneath the waves, about humans who had learned to swim before they learned to walk. The cubs listened with wonder in their eyes. They had been taught that humans were weak, but the human they knew was not weak. She was kind. She was brave. She was different from them in 1,000 ways, but also the same in the ways that mattered most. And in that small corner of a distant space station, something changed. Not because of treaties or diplomacy or grand speeches, but because 5 young hearts had refused to let fear become hate. Because sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths. Because sometimes the youngest among us show us who we are supposed to be. The water had risen to drown her, but the cubs had hauled her back to shore, together, and the galaxy would never be quite the same again.